Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm going to look at Rolling Stones' Beggars Banquet from 1968. So this is, before I get into the album, this is my, well, I'm not sure if it's an original copy. I picked it up at a Wimbledon record fair not so long ago, because I seem to have lost my original copy, which was not an original, it was a late 70s press, but this is the original gatefold with the original, and it's got the nice protective inner sleeve. As I said, I'm not sure if it's original. I think I paid £50 for this. But anyway, there's a long story to tell about the cover. But before I get into that and show you my other edition of Beggars Banquet, first of all to say it came out on the 6th of December 1968. It was delayed several months due to controversy around the album cover. It's 39 minutes 44 seconds long, so pretty much perfect length for an album. The first album of theirs to be produced by Jimmy Miller, who also produced Traffic around the same time as this. Recorded between March and July of 68. And as I say, the front cover was going to be something completely different. And I just picked up the 2018 50th anniversary edition just a couple of weeks ago, because I saw it for a good price, and it's housed in the original italic writing invitation cover, but inside is the original cover, which was the graffiti on a toilet wall, both front and back. The gatefold was the same, but anyway, Decca strongly objected to this cover and said it's in dubious taste, and so they ended up not putting it out like that at the time, although the reissues now have reinstated that original cover. This Bill Wyman's book, which was great, from I think it was the early 90s he wrote this, he's got interesting words to say about this cover, particularly a quote from Mick. Mick later said, "We really tried to keep the album within the bounds of good taste. I mean, we haven't shown the whole lavatory, that would have been rude. We've only shown the top half. We did not deliberately go out to produce a cover of this kind for sensationalism or to offend them," inverted commas. It was simply an idea that had not been done before when you chose to put the writing on a lavatory wall, because that's where you see most writings on walls. Anyway, Decca refused to put it out, so the album didn't get released till December, which was a shame. I actually personally, call me conservative if you like, but I actually prefer the original cover. But the good thing about this 50th anniversary is you get both. You can house the original cover inside the, you can house the what the Stones intended to be the original cover inside the what was released. And just while we're on the subject of this cover, a friend of mine, Kalman, who runs a record shop in Budapest, has recently moved premises to nearer the Parliament, and he uses this italic writing on his website to advertise his store, which I thought was quite a nice touch. I hope that gets him a few extra customers. So the unfortunate thing with that being delayed, the album being delayed, is it came out after the Beatles' White Album, and inevitably they got accused of copying the White Album cover, but I think that's a little unfair, because the original cover wasn't intended to be white at all. But and if Beggars Banquet had been released since, say, in October, maybe it would have had an even better reputation. It was recorded in Olympic Studios, which is in Barnes, for those of you who don't know, and it's now a cinema. So you can go and check out where the Stones recorded a lot of their great work, and also the Beatles in '69 recorded a couple of songs there. Brian Jones is featured on this album quite a lot, actually. Mick Jagger said this was his last significant contribution. He was on a couple of tracks on Let It Bleed, but I think particularly his slide guitar work on No Expectations is sensational. But by and large, he was unreliable during this period, and Keith had to take on most of the guitar duties. And there's a nice mixture on this album of acoustic and electric. I would say primarily acoustic if we listen to every track. and complemented nicely by Nicky Hopkins on piano and various other guest musicians. Dave Mason's on one track, Rick Gretsch I noticed was on one track. So Jumping Jack Flash was a single released in May '68, recorded in the same sessions as this album, and it's interesting that they didn't put it on the album. Similar to Hey Jude from the Beatles not going on the White Album, I suppose, because in those days, bands in Britain in particular didn't put singles on albums, for better for worse. The album actually only reached number 3 in the UK and number 5 in the US, which surprised me when I looked it up because I assumed it was a number 1. They were going to promote the album with this Rock and Roll Circus, which was recorded a few days after the album came out. But for one reason or another, it wasn't released for a good few decades until it came out on this DVD. By all accounts, the Stones were not very happy with their performance, and they thought they might have got overshadowed by The Who. But watching it, it's a very good period piece, and you can see various people here, like Eric Clapton, obviously The Who, John and Yoko, appearing, as well as Taj Mahal. So to the tracks, well, I think this is a superb album, and it's in my top 3 or 4 Stones albums, and it opens superbly with Sympathy for the Devil. And what's noticeable about this track is there's no drums as such, it's mainly percussion. They tried it out in a few different styles, and then Nicky Hopkins comes in on the piano on about the second verse, and just playing these chords very simply, and just really lifts the song. And then Keith just comes up with this guitar solo to die for, and it's just superb. It's obviously a very dark lyric about the sort of darkness in every human being potentially. Hang around St. Petersburg when I saw it was time for a change, killed the Tsar and his ministers, Anastasia screamed in vain. Drove the tank, held a general's rank when the blitzkrieg raged and the bodies stank. I was around when Jesus Christ had his moment of doubt and pain, made damn sure that Pilate washed his hands and sealed his fate. So as I say, dark lyrics, but the Stones were good at this kind of stuff. They were kind of the Antichrist, if you like, in many ways, trying to have a sort of alternative image to the wholesome images that maybe the Beatles and a couple of other bands had. And obviously that did lead in some ways to some ugly scenes at Altamont in '69 when someone got killed in the audience. But anyway, that was the times, and they got away with it. They didn't put the lyrics on the sleeve, probably wisely, because some of the lyrics are quite dark and a little bit dodgy by modern standards. But No Expectations is a great blues song with some, as I mentioned, some superb slide from Brian. Dear Doctor is a fun country number with silly lyrics. Mick singing falsetto towards the end, and him and Keith singing good harmony throughout. Parachute Woman, sort of nice blues song with great guitar from Keith. Jigsaw Puzzle, nice musicianship from Nicky Hopkins and co, and obviously the band. Bill Wyman's on good form on this track on bass. And then you flip it over to side 2, and Street Fighting Man was a kind of anthem for the times, 1968, with the Paris riots and the Russian tanks entering the streets of Prague in Czechoslovakia. But it wasn't a single at the time, from what I can gather, not in England or the US. Maybe it released later, but it's obviously gone down in the history books as one of the Stones' all-time classics, and rightly so. Prodigal Son was originally credited to Jagger Richards, but they rightly credit it to Robert Wilkins on later pressing. Stray Cat Blues is a good blues number with a good electric guitar. Slightly dodgy lyrics, to put it mildly, about a 15-year-old girl. As I say, they didn't put the lyrics on the album, otherwise they probably would have got into trouble with that even in 1968. Factory Girl is a good little track. Rick Gretsch, I think, is on that number. Salt of the Earth, Keith sings the lead on the first verse, and it's quite a fun number, and that was actually featured on the Rock and Roll Hall of the Rock and Roll Circus, because the Stones set opened with Jumping Jack Flash, then did Parachute Woman, No Expectations from this album. You can't always get what you want, which unreleased came on Let It Bleed a year later, as we know. Sympathy for the Devil from this album and Salt of the Earth from this album. So it really was a promotion. So the album probably would have done better had that promotional material been released at the time. But anyway, apparently when Mick had finished the album, he threw a party at the Vesuvio nightclub in West End of London. I think it's just off the Tottenham Court Road, I was reading. And everyone was having a jolly good time. And then Paul McCartney turned up with an acetate of the new Beatles song, Hey Jude. And apparently that kind of overshadowed the new album by the Stones. So Mick was a bit peeved at that. I thought it was quite an interesting story. Talking of the Beatles and the Stones, there was a lot of similarities between the two bands at the time. I mean, I would say in 68, 69, the quality of the Stones' music was on a par with the Beatles. They'd given up trying to copy them, you know, with their Satanic Majesties or We Love You and stuff like that. And the white covers, as I say, are similar. Nicky Hopkins was on Revolution and also on this album. Glyn Johns was engineering and would later, a month after this album came out, Beggars, Banquet, he was engineering the Get Back sessions, as we know. Alan Klein was the manager of the Stones and was shortly to become the manager of the Beatles. And even to this day, if you buy a Rolling Stones record up until 1970, it's got ABCO, which stands for Alan and Betty Klein Organisation, I think, still on the sleeve, prominently featured. So he's passed away now, Alan Klein, but his estate still owns the Rolling Stones catalogue between 63 and 1970. And then I mentioned Olympic Studios, where the band recorded the album, which was used by the Beatles as well. Now this, I wanted to show you this film because this was made by Mick Jagger in 1968, and it was delayed until 1970 release-wise, but it's very much of the time, and it was delayed because I think the film company thought they were expecting another kind of sort of film, a bit like Hard Day's Night, but with the Stones instead of the Beatles, and they were a bit shocked. I think one of the Warner Brothers executive wife was sick or something, watching the premiere, watching the sort of rough cut of the film, and she was very upset. So anyway, they rejected it and they didn't want to release it, and it didn't come out till 2 years later. But James Fox is playing a gangster called Chaz, and he's sort of on the run, and he turns up at Mick Jagger's house and rents a room from him, and there's very surreal scenes. It's a great film. It really is. I think it's acclaimed as one of the greatest British films of all time, actually. And as I say, James Fox and Mick Jagger are the main stars, but Anita Pallenberg, who was going out with Keith at the time, although Keith was suspicious of Anita and Mick having some kind of scene while they were making the movie. That's kind of not proven either way, I don't think, but there's a good soundtrack, and this soundtrack came out a few years ago, and it's on beautiful yellow vinyl, and there's some tracks there's one track from Mick called Memo from Turner, which is absolutely brilliant track, which apparently Steve Winwood and Jim Capaldi play on. I think it's, or they play on one of the versions, I'm not sure. But Memo from Turner is great. Then there's Jack Niche wrote a lot of the instrumental stuff, and Ry Cooder's on superb guitar duties. Randy Newman sings one song, and it's just worth checking out. I don't know why they didn't feature James Fox's picture on the cover. I guess because it wasn't going to sell as many copies as Mick's face, and also on the DVD you've got Mick shown twice there, although that's James there in the middle with the dark glasses. Superb performance. He spent 2 months in the East End of London hanging out with gangsters trying to get into the part, and it really paid dividends because he gives a very authentic performance. And that Murmur from Turner song actually finished up on here, Metamorphosis, which was a compilation from 1975, sorry. Just wanted to show you a few things about this album. Because I've got it on now on big vinyl size, I'm able to study it a bit more, but I must admit I did cheat and read the Bill Wyman book. And it's got various things on here which I didn't notice. Bob Dylan's Dream is written here. We've got John Loves Yoko here. We've got God Rolls His Own somewhere here. Got just under the Rolling Stones, God Rolls His Own. Got Lyndon Loves Mao is on here as well. There's a nude woman, picture of a nude woman, Parachute Woman, Land on Me Tonight on the back cover. So, but all in all, I don't like this cover at all. I don't know what you think, but I thought it was interesting that it had those sort of, and also every track from the album is sort of scribbled on here somewhere. So if you look for, Prodigal Son is here and Jigsaw Puzzle is somewhere else. So that was quite interesting. So anyway, Beggars, Banquet, yeah, in my top 5 Stones albums for sure. Probably not my number 1. Maybe that would be Exile on Main Street or Sticky Fingers. But this is a superb song and was easily the best album that had come up with up until that time, in my opinion, even though Between the Buttons is quite commendable. But this would be the start of their golden period, which would last all the way through Exile and about half of Goat's Head Soup as well. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.